Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about Empress Irene of the Byzantine Empire and just about her life and the things that she accomplished in her lifetime, how she came into power, how she lost her power multiple times and came back into it, and ultimately how she lost her power. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about her early life. Alright, so Empress Irene was born into the Sarantapicos family sometime in the early 750s AD. This was a noble family with power and influence in Greek society. However, she was an orphan, noted for her beauty, but had extended family members who took care of her and raised her. In 769, she was taken to Constantinople. She would have been in her early to mid teens at this point, and this was by order of Emperor Constantine V, and then she was married to Leo IV, his son, and became the emperor's consort, and this happened pretty fast. So historians don't have a lot of evidence as to why she was chosen. There is some evidence to suggest that her family beliefs about icons were not completely in line with Constantine's, because during this period in the Byzantine Empire, there was a really big debate going on about the iconophiles and the iconoclasts. So the iconophiles believed in using religious icons such as like images or statues of saints or Jesus in order to worship the Christian God, whereas iconoclasts were completely against the use of icons in worship and wanted them banned. So historians aren't exactly sure why she was chosen, but they were married, and then in 1771 she gave birth to a son who she named Constantine VI, which was keeping the name within family tradition. And then she became empress in 1775 when her husband Leo took the throne after the death of his father in 1775. So at this point, Leo was just 25 when he took the throne, so he was rather young to be taking the throne, and Irene herself would have been somewhere in her early 20s or even her late teens. So during his rule, Leo IV took a more moderate approach towards the iconoclastic debate than his fathers before him. And this didn't last the entirety of his rule, however, and his policies became more harsh around the year 780. One historian equates this sudden change in policy with the discovery of icons under Irene's pillow, and this story may not be exactly accurate, and it does lack evidence, but it is possible that Irene's more iconophilic background and beliefs may have caused her husband's increase in strict policy. Alright, so later that year, in 7080, Leo IV died, and Irene was given temporary power through regency. So, regency meant like a regent was a person given the power of the monarch on a temporary basis due to some reason preventing the true monarch from acting and in the absence of a chosen successor. So, her son was too young at the time to properly rule, and so until he came into it, so when he came into his title when his father died, he was too young, so she ruled for him. So her rule was almost immediately contested by supporters of her husband's half-brother who wanted him to take power. But she had these men banished and gave their positions of power to people who were loyal to her. So essentially, she removed the power of anyone who stood against her and the legitimacy of her role, and she had them taken completely out of her kingdom. She also had Leo's half-brother and all of his brothers made priests, which prevented them from taking over a ruling position. In doing so, she not only eliminated the greatest threat to her throne, but several other ruling age males from her husband who may have been eligible. The only person she seemed content to offer power to was her husband's sister, Anthosa, who she offered the role of co-regent, but this was likely done more for political reasons because she wanted to try and make relations better with her deceased husband's family, as they had kind of fallen out at this point, and either way, the sister refused. So she very clearly valued her power and sought to keep it for herself. This is evidenced by her tendency of removing any threats to her out of the equation, and this was quite uncommon behavior for a woman at the time, especially within the Byzantine Empire. And she displayed a variety of unconventional behavior in both how she presented herself and how she placed herself in relation to the powerful men in her life, namely her son Constantine. So rather than see herself as regent and her son as ruler, she seems to have considered her and her son to be co-rulers. In nearly all archaeological sources from her rule, her picture is seen in the more powerful role, and her name is always written before her son's. You can kind of see this in the coin on the slide. And she also did not allow her son to play an active role in any political affairs at this point. And one of the things she did was allow icons back into the Christian religion. This is something, if you remember back earlier in this video, this was something she had always kind of supported or was more inclined towards, even when it was contrary to the strict beliefs of her husband's family. So then there were 2 councils ordered by Irene during her regency. One was in Constantinople, which failed. She was not able to get the icons passed through. But there was another council in Nicaea, and this one was much more successful. The church members came together and ultimately decided to allow the worship of icons depicting Christian figures, such as like God, Jesus, and the Christian saints, back into worship. Alright, so as I'm sure you can imagine, at this point, Constantine was not fond of living under his mother's shadow and being prevented from accessing the power he was born into in the title. So his mother, over the course of her regency, had completely prevented him from using his power, and even when he reached adulthood, Irene did not increase the scope of his power and continued to act in her regent role. So he did attempt to forcibly remove his mother from power, but she was quick to shut him down and make him swear a fidelity oath. And she did not stop here and attempted to convince the army to stand with her and affirm her as the absolute power. This did ultimately lead to a military rebellion in 790, and Constantine was elected by the soldiers as the rightful ruler. Despite this, his position of power was uncertain, and he was not very popular with the public. He had a couple scandals and some controversial decisions, and he ended up deciding to allow his mother some of her power back, and they ruled together as a duumvirate, which basically meant that the 2 of them were sharing the role of emperor. So Irene was not only powerful again, but angry and and pushed back against those who went against her during the rebellion and previously. So she essentially was able to now take out all her frustration on the people who had removed her previously from power and the people who were going against her now. So she had strong support in the empire, and she was able to work together with her supporters against her son and drive him out of the city to the provinces. And despite his attempt at escape through the provinces, he was stopped and taken back to Constantinople. There is no historical evidence that provides clarity on what exactly happened to him after the event. There are some sources that say he was blinded and likely succumbed to his injuries from this incident, but regardless, he does not appear in history again, so it's safe to assume he probably did not survive this. So, after disposing of her son, she made herself emperor by her own right. So she didn't make herself empress or regent or anything like that. She made herself emperor and gave herself that title, making her the first woman in the empire to do so. So Irene's rule lasted until 802, when the aristocrats turned on her and removed her as ruler. She was replaced by a man called Nicephorus and exiled to Lesbos. She did not live long in exile and died the next year. She was likely around age 50 when she died. Alright, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about her legacy and kind of just break down what we've already discussed and kind of interpret some things. So now that we understand who Irene is and all that she went through and accomplished in her life, there's a couple conclusions we can draw. She was clearly a strong woman who carried strong beliefs and had a desire for power that was insatiable. Her position against iconoclasm held strong even in the face of familial opposition, and she was eventually able to rule this issue in her favor, so she persevered. We also see her tenacious desire for power and ability to hold that power against opposition. She also seems to have been rather ruthless in her methods, often using her power to completely eliminate the threats to her rule, including her own son. And although she did lose her power several times, she seemed always ready to have a plan to take it back and punish those who went against her. Her role as Empress was extremely unconventional for the time, and many of the things she accomplished, namely the bringing of icons back into the church, seem to have had a significant impact on the greater history of the period. She wielded not only the political power at her disposal, but also the military power, and held power on and off for many, many years.